Going on, guys? Today we're looking at Indiana ahead of the 2024-25 season. And like I've done in each one of these videos, we're going to go through the roster, the projected lineup in rotation, and schedule and predictions for Indiana. And before we get into that, quick recap of last year. So it was I guess, up and down season for Indiana last season. It was Coach Woodson's third year at the program. They went 19-14 overall, 10-10 in the Big Ten, which was good enough for sixth in the conference, but not good enough to get into the NCAA tournament. They went 1-1 in the Big Ten tournament, and they had a pretty bad loss to Nebraska when they went down. And it was a team that just never really seemed to find its rhythm. Part of that is probably because their point guard, Xavier Johnson, was never healthy throughout the season. He was kind of in and out of the lineup, and that contributed to the inconsistency with the team. You had guys like Gabe Cupps playing a lot more minutes than probably Coach Woodson had anticipated, and the team just really it didn't gel. They had some good pieces, but the pieces didn't quite fit together. And so, with that being said, I think now is an appropriate time to start moving ahead and looking at this season. And with that said, Xavier Johnson is one of the two key players who are gone, along with Kel'el Ware. Ware was their best player, or second best player, depending on how you rate Malik Renault last season. And he's a big loss. He's a shot blocking center on one end who can hit a three on the other. He was really good for them last season, transferred over from Oregon with some concerns about his work ethic and ability to just play consistently. And I think he did a good job of answering some of those questions last season. And he's got, he left big shoes to fill at the center position. Who's back, though? Well, like I mentioned, Malik Renault, really, really good forward, can score inside, can even pass a little bit, average just under 3 assists per game. And Mackenzie Mbako, talented McDonald's All-American, started out slow last season, but I really thought improved as the year went on. He's a 6'8" forward who can score really on all three levels. He's going to be a really important player for them this season. Trey Galloway is back. He played a lot of minutes for them, started on the majority of the games last season, averaged around 10 points, just over 4.5 assists per game last season. Not a great shooter, but does a lot of things that help a team win. Gabe Cupps is also back. Like I said, probably played more minutes and started a lot more games than Coach Woodson anticipated last year. He's kind of like a setup point guard, more of a classic type point guard. Hopefully he can improve over his numbers last year. And Anthony Leal is also back. He's a guy who can shoot the three, but doesn't play a ton of minutes, not in the rotation every game last season, but did play more as the year went on. So with that being said, Indiana arguably has the best transfer class in the country. When you look at who's new, you start off with the big man, Umar Ballo. Averaged 13 points, 11 rebounds last year at Arizona, and is just a classic center who's going to protect the rim. Not the best shot blocker, but uses his size well on the defensive end, is a great rebounder, and can score inside. His good hands score around the basket. Miles Rice, one of the better stories in college basketball last season. After missing his first 2 years due to cancer, he was able to be a really impactful player for Washington State last season. Averaged 15 points and just under 4 assists per game. And Kenan Carlisle comes over from Stanford, who's a really good scorer. Got off to a late start to the season, missed the first, I'd say, 10 games for Stanford, and then had some really explosive scoring performances, and I'm very curious how he fits in to this Indiana team. Luke Goody transfers over from Illinois. He's a good three-point shooter who I expect to contribute for this team. And Langdon Hatton comes over as a big who I think is going to be your backup to Umar Ballo. And then lastly, but not least important here for certain, is Bryson Tucker, a 6'6" swingman ranked number 30 in the class, the lone freshman coming in for Indiana this season, who I expect to be part of the rotation, and I'm not sure whether that's going to be as a starter or coming off the bench. And I think that's an appropriate time as we transition here to look at the projected lineup and rotation. If you've enjoyed this video so far, please give us a like. It helps us grow. Now, how do I see the starting lineup shaping up? Well, I think 4 spots are pretty secure. And that 5th spot, I think, is between 4 people, which is kind of crazy to say, but that's how I see it. So here's my starting lineup right now. Here's what I got. Miles Rice, Kenan Carlisle, Mackenzie Mbako, Malik Renew, and Umar Ballo. Now, what's the spot that I think is up for grabs? The Carlisle spot. I'm not so sure that he's a starter for this team. I think Trey Galloway, Bryson Tucker, and even Luke Goody could start ahead of Carlisle. Also because I think Carlisle profiles as a really nice 6th man, a guy who can be like a spark plug off the bench. And so as of right now, I have him in that starting role, but I think it would probably make more sense if it was Galloway, Tucker, or Goody, just based off of they have more size, and with Goody especially, he's a really good shooter and would provide more spacing in the starting lineup. And speaking of shooting, I think that's a common talking point with this Indiana team, the lack of three-point shooting that this team has. And I think it's true, but I also think it's a little bit overblown. And I'll tell you the reason why I think that's the case. Because, yes, Malik Reneau, not a good shooter. Miles Rice, did not shoot the ball well at Washington State last season. He was around 27% from 3 on, around 3.5, 4 attempts per game. And Carlisle wasn't a good three-point shooter. However, Mackenzie Mbako, while he shot around 32% from 3 last season overall, really improved in conference play and made 38% of his threes on 5 attempts per game. And that's why I think if Luke Goody ends up in that starting role, or maybe Bryson Tucker is a better three-point shooter than some of the scouting reports that I've read suggest, this team's shooting is not going to be as big of a concern as some people have said. And so, with that being said, I think the main, outside of that, the main question for me is like the overall rotation. I think those, like I've said, I think they've got 4 clear starters. How the minutes are adjusted here by Coach Woodson is going to be something that I'm going to be intrigued by and looking forward to as the season progresses, because I think there's a lot of guys, not necessarily a lot of guys, but there's 8 or 9 guys on this team. Plus, I don't have right now Gabe Cupps or Anthony Leal in the rotation, and they were part of the rotation last year. So it's going to be interesting how he manages the minutes for a program with arguably 11 guys who think they could be as part of the rotation this upcoming season. So as you look at the schedule, and I make my predictions here for Indiana basketball, they don't have a ton of really difficult non-conference games. They do play a strange home game against South Carolina. And then they'll be in the Bahamas for the Battle for Atlantis tournament, where they'll take on Louisville, then either West Virginia or Gonzaga. And then it could be Oklahoma, Providence, Davidson, or Arizona in that last game. So, they could have 4 challenging non-conference games. The rest of them, from what I could tell, more of the low major, mid-major variety, more low major, to be clear. In conference play, they'll have home and away games with Ohio State, Penn State, and Purdue. And at home, they'll have Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Rutgers, UCLA, and USC. So the 2 new California schools will come to visit at Indiana. And on the road, they'll have Iowa, Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern, Oregon, Washington, and Wisconsin. So they'll have to take that trip to the Pacific Northwest this season. So my predictions for the regular season and how I think this Indiana team is going to do. I got them going 9-2 in non-conference. I think they've got a lot of winnable non-conference games. And look, last year's team had some injuries, didn't quite fit together all the way. This year's team, while I have concerns about the three-point shooting overall, I don't think it's as bad as maybe some others have said. I think they're going to be a little bit better. I got them 13-7 in conference play, which gives them a 22-9 overall record, and I believe that gets them in the NCAA tournament. But let me know what you guys think. How do you see Indiana doing this season? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. We're going to be doing college basketball and NBA draft content all year long. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.